looking bunch of GIs. Well, and you too, Joe.
Oh!
Say, I thought maybe we could shelter in here with you fellas until the parade starts. What do you say?
Oh, yeah, sure, you betcha.
All right, good. Hey, what are you drinking back there, Joe?
Oh, boy, we got ice cold grain belt. That's all these boys drink. I don't need anything else in the cooler but grain belt.
Is that right?
Yeah, we do have a good looking bunch here today. We got old Donnie Ward here. And Doc Westrup, our own Doc Westrup. Over on the snooker table, we got Paul Abrahamson. And Bob Earley. He's from Fountain, but we like him anyway. And over to my right, we have Orval Amdahl, our man from the Pacific. Yeah, we're real happy to have the boys back home here in Minnesota. And we worried for quite a bit of time there with them over there in the war and all. Especially you, Paul. You know, spending all that time in that German POW camp, that was, I know it was hard on you, but it was hard on us too. We worried sick about you for all that time. So, you know, old Joe's just happy to have everybody back here in Lanesboro and enjoying some snooker and some beer. God bless you, boys.
I'm glad to be back too. You know, I did have to wait a while before I fully got back to Lanesboro. First, I got stuck in Camp Lucky Strike in France. That was a doozy. Then afterwards, I got put in a Boston hospital because I had hepatitis. Eventually, I did make it home, and my family threw a huge party. They also lifted up my chair like I was some sort of royalty. Kind of embarrassing.
So Paul, what was it like being a POW?
I could see England in the distance when the B-17 bomber crashed. That's when I pulled my parachute cord and floated safely down to a Belgian backyard, where I was greeted by Jerry with a gun. That's when I became a Kriegi. That's what we POWs called ourselves. Comes from the German word for prisoner of war. 15 months and 5 days I spent in that camp. Lost about a third of my weight, because food was either rotten or scarce. Very little clean water, very little heat or bedding during the winter time, so we often ended up with frostbite. It was an experience. But then, the day one of those Red Cross boxes came in, well, that was like your birthday and Christmas wrapped all into one. Thank you, Red Cross. You didn't have to be sure to eat that beautiful spam very slowly. Otherwise, you might not be able to keep it down. You know, just last week, I didn't eat cabbage, and I found myself rolling on the ground in pain. I haven't had it since the war.
Heck, Paul, I feel that way about cabbage all the time.
You know, Paul, I read that Holocaust survivors had digestive problems due to starvation. That could be your problem.
Hey, I'm alive, aren't I? That's what really matters. To finish off the story, whenever you weren't working in prison, it was very boring. There was little to do, so I kept lists. Lists of all the books I've ever read, lists of all the states and their capitals, and lists of every single one of my family and friends, so I could contact them if I ever found a way out. And lists of every single Flying Fortress B-17 bomber that was represented by a POW in camp. About 167 total. First, there was the Herky Jerky 2. That one was mine. And there was the Stardust, Goring's Nightmare, Panama Hattie, Captain of the Kids.
Hey, Paul, you're not going to say all 167, are you?
Jack the Ripper,
You don't
Wawa
need to
Scan.
rank.
That's all I'm saying. It's enough. I'm just kidding.
Hey, Doc! Yeah. I heard you were made lieutenant commander. That's almost royalty. How did that happen?
Well, I was in the only battle on U.S. soil. It was in the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. Now, the Japs had taken 2 of the islands, and we were there to get them back. But it was a tough battle. And the weather, it was even worse. We treated more frostbite victims than wounds, hundreds of cases. But in the end, The Japanese had it much worse, and we ended up taking back those islands. But speaking of royalty, Bob Worry. Now, Bob, I heard that there was a newsreel that was made of you and your heroics as tank commander, and that newsreel was shown in theaters everywhere. Now, if we want to roll out the red carpet for royalty, it's with that guy right there.
We were just lucky that we had our big shootout right in front of the press and the general. And we sent them running. I commanded a team of men that will never be matched in 1,000 years. And we went over a year without a single casualty. We functioned like a Swiss watch and worked with the other tanks like a football team. One of our commanders shot the weak side of the German Panzer tank while we were rounding out the other one. That tank then blocked the rest of the Germans from coming at us. It was all just like football, but very, very serious, especially if you lost. Let's hear it from you, though, Captain Orval Amdahl. That sounds pretty romantic.
Sounds like a challenge there.
Frankly, I don't know how I made captain. I fought in a lot of places though. A real tour of the Pacific. Started out in Guadalcanal in the back with the artillery. And the whole time, I never knew that my good buddy Donald Rose was dying over there. He was a good friend of mine. College buddy. Football buddy. Great guy. Say fellas, let's have a quick toast to my good friend Don Rose. To you, bud.
You know, this has been a hell of a war, just a hell of a war. You know, soldiers go in where angels fear to tread. Say, weren't you and Marie married at the start of this war?
We sure were. I got permission from my superiors while I was training up in Virginia. Marie was a saint. She spent most of the war living with her family in Minneapolis. But the first time I came home, she got to spend some time with me in San Francisco for a little while. Wouldn't you know though, I wasn't there for long before I got shipped back overseas again. This time to the Battle of Saipan in the Mariana Islands. But before I went off, Marie and I made ourselves a little code so that I could tell her where I was without giving away my position to the enemy in case our mail got intercepted. So, for example, if I wrote, "I'm going to the beaches," well, that meant that I was in the Mariana Islands. But if I said, "I'm going to the chow hall," well, that meant that I was in Guadalcanal. And wouldn't you know, after the war ended, I still wasn't allowed to go home. I wound up in Nagasaki after the atom bomb dropped, as a matter of fact. What a mess that was. We had Geiger counters and we secured the area. One day, I was walking along doing my thing, clearing area, and I saw a great big building in front of me. And I thought, well, it's got to get cleared and somebody's got to do it. It might as well be me. So I walked right up to it. I swung open that door, and on the other side, nothing left. It was just a wall. It was like the whole city had just, poof, disappeared. Horrible.
Now, I'll bet none of you fellas have ever been in charge of a regiment of black soldiers.
Can't say that.
Well, that's what I did during the war. I was in charge of it. We were called the Aviation Engineer Corps. We built airstrips for those B-17 flying fortresses. Like you, football. We were near Ipswich, which is right next to the English Channel.
Commanding a regiment of black soldiers, it's a very long ways away from Lanesboro life. What's that like?
It's a lot different than living in little old Lanesboro, let me tell you. By the time we got over there, I'd learned a lot about their ways. I had a driver by the name of Percy that drove my Jeep. Percy was a great guy. He protected me, taught me an awful lot. You know, some of the fellas, they wanted to be up at the front fighting, but you know, it was very important building those airstrips also. They could go into any pub or bar that they wanted. It didn't matter what color you were. Some of the fellas, especially the ones from down south, they wanted to stay over there. They didn't want to go back to the States because of segregation. Now back in Florida, at basic training where we all started out, things were a lot different. Myself and some of the officers were sitting around one day and we heard shots. We hopped in the Jeep and drove out to see what was going on. And next thing you know, there were bullets flying at us in Florida. I couldn't believe it. We dove for the ditch. Next thing you know, boom, I got shot right in the elbow. I couldn't believe it. it was a race riot, if you can believe that. Now, the day before, in the mess hall, why those German POWs that were supposed to be serving us, they refused to serve our own black soldiers.
Typical Germans.
Yeah. And get this, our officers, who were from down south, well, they sided with the Germans. I couldn't believe it. You know, back when we were in England, with my own little regiment, things went a lot better.
Okay.
This guy's only
That's my shot.
no ladies.
You know, we've been listening to you guys telling your war stories. Well, we've got some of our own.
We may not have gone to the front lines, but we fought our own battles here at home just to stay in uniform.
That's right. We are WAVES, Women's Naval Reserve. Some of us worked as code breakers in intelligence. And some of us worked in navigation. And we had to do a little clerical work too. This here is Signe Soma. She was stationed at a Florida naval base, training pilots in navigation. Now, gentlemen, do you know what that means?
What?
She had training as a pilot first.
Mm-hmm.
No.
You can only imagine how much those pilots liked being taught navigation by a woman. Uh-huh. This is Ruby Nelson here, who started as a whack but joined the Waves for some more excitement. She worked in a military pharmacy. We both went to Hunter College in New York for basic training where we learned to march, follow orders, and had physical strength training. That's where we specialized. You know, when I was there, I ran into my brother-in-law, George Taylor from Lanesboro. Yeah. He was stationed on Long Island searching for German U-boats prowling our waters at night. They were training him in the new radar navigation.
Say, folks, I think we gotta head back out to the street or we're gonna miss the parade.
Oh, hey,
Thanks for the stories, everybody.
Fellas,
Hey, we're part of this.